Something stopped responding, not dramatically. Not with an event you can point to and say, "This is where everything stalled." It happened silently and gradually over days or weeks. The process that was underway, that was producing visible results, that was confirming you were on the right track, simply stopped giving feedback. The practices that generated specific states stopped generating them with the same consistency. The efforts that produced movement stopped producing proportional results. The relationships that were responding in a new way stopped responding with the same energy. The intuition that was becoming clearer became more difficult to access. The surrounding field entered a silence that was not asked for and that has no obvious cause that you can identify and correct. And you don't know what to do with it because you didn't stop. You didn't give up. You didn't revert to old patterns. You kept doing what you were doing when things were moving. And yet the movement stopped. And the silence that remained in place of the movement has a quality that is difficult to name but very easy to misinterpret. The most common interpretation is abandonment. That the field stopped responding because you did something wrong. That you lost alignment. That there is a mistake you are making that is creating this blockage and that you need to identify and correct it before things start moving again. And this interpretation produces a very specific response. You intensify. You try harder. You change your approach. You seek external confirmation that you are still in the process. You look for the error. You increase your effort in the hope that enough effort will break the silence and restore movement. What you don't know is that this silence is not abandonment. It's the test. And the way you're responding to it is exactly what's being evaluated. Stay until the end. Because understanding what's really happening in that silence will completely change what you do within it. There's something nobody tells you about how the levels actually open up. Most narratives about growth and transformation have a linear logic that seems to make sense. You work, you grow, you demonstrate that you are ready through effort and commitment, and the next level opens up as recognition of that work. As if there were a direct and proportional relationship between how much you dedicate yourself and how much you advance. As if the field functioned as a reward system that responds to demonstrated merit. But that's not how things work in the field. The field doesn't evaluate effort. It evaluates frequency. And frequency isn't what you do, it's who you are. The state from which you operate. The internal quality you maintain regardless of external confirmation, regardless of visible results, regardless of feedback confirming you're on the right track. And there's a very specific reason why the next level only opens after a period of silence. Each level of reality has a specific frequency that defines it. A quality of presence, of certainty, of relationship with what is desired that is different from the quality of the previous level. And this frequency cannot be demonstrated while the field is actively responding. Because as long as there is confirmation, as long as there is visible result, as long as external feedback is present, you don't need to operate at the frequency of the next level. You can operate at the frequency of the current level and still receive what the next level has to offer simply because the context is creating the conditions for it. It is only when the context stops creating those conditions, when the feedback goes away, when the visible result disappears, when silence settles in, that it becomes clear what the real frequency is of where you are operating. Because in silence you have no external support. You have no confirmation. You have no result to justify continuing. You have no feedback to tell you that you are right. Continue. You only have what is inside you. And what is inside you, the quality of the state you maintain without any external incentive to maintain it, is exactly what the field is evaluating. Think of it this way. Imagine you are learning to swim. At the beginning, the instructor is by your side. You feel his hands underwater supporting your body. You know that if you start to sink, you have immediate support. And within this condition, you can execute the movements maintain the position, and demonstrate that you are learning. But the instructor can't assess whether you've truly learned while their hands are underwater. The only way to evaluate is to remove the support and see what happens when you're alone in the water. See if the movements you learned remain when the support is gone. See if the quality of what you've developed is real enough to stand on its own without the presence of the hands that were supporting you. The silence of the field is the withdrawal of the instructor's hands, not to make you sink. To find out if what has been developed so far is real enough to stand on its own without external support. If the frequency you were demonstrating when there was confirmation is genuine enough to remain when the confirmation is gone. And this evaluation can only happen in silence, because with external support present, it's impossible to know what is genuine and what was being sustained by the context. Silence separates the two with a precision that no other phase of the process can produce. And it's important to understand how this test manifests itself concretely in the life of the person going through it, because the form it takes rarely looks like a test. It looks like a problem. It looks like a blockage. It looks like evidence that something went wrong at a point you haven't yet identified and that you need to find and correct before things start moving again. And this interpretation is natural. It's the interpretation any reasonable person would make given what they're feeling, because the silent test doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with an explanation that it's temporary and has a specific function. It arrives as an absence, as a quality of silence that covers areas that previously had movement and now have a stillness that feels wrong in a way you can't fully articulate but feel very clearly. And because it seems wrong, you try to fix it. And because you try to fix what doesn't need fixing, because you apply problem-solving logic to something that isn't a problem, the situation often gets worse before you understand what's really happening. So let's describe each of the forms that this silence takes with the care they deserve, not in an abstract way, in a way that is concrete enough for you to recognize them in your own life at the moment you are experiencing them. The first place where silence appears is in practices that generated specific states. And this is often the first sign that something has changed because the practices were the most direct way you had to confirm that you were in the process. To feel that there was real access to the frequency you were seeking. To have internal evidence that the work was producing something real. The meditation that used to put you in a state of presence and clarity that lasted for hours begins to produce less. Not all at once. Gradually. The first time it happens you attribute it to a bad day, a mind more agitated than usual, external conditions that weren't ideal. The second and third time you begin to realize it's not circumstantial. It's a change in the quality of access that persists regardless of the conditions. The practice of visualization, which created a real and physically felt sensation of already being in what you desired, that quality of presence in the future state that seemed genuine and not just imagined, becomes more difficult to access with the same depth. You try to do what you've always done. You create the same images, use the same anchors, follow the same process. And what you receive has less substance, less emotion, less of the quality of reality it had before. It seems more like intellectual imagination than felt experience. And you don't know what has changed because you haven't changed what you do. The states of flow, of clarity, of connection with the incoming frequency, those you had learned to enter relatively consistently, and which were the most direct confirmation that you were on the right path, become more elusive. They appear more sporadically. When they do appear, they are shorter in duration. They are more dependent on specific external conditions to manifest than they used to be, as if the window of access that was opening has become smaller or harder to find. And you try to solve it, because that's what you do with problems. You identify what has changed and try to change it back. You research what you might be doing wrong. You add new elements to the practice in the hope that something new will restore the access. that what you were doing before seems to have lost. You consult content. You search for techniques. You ask people who seem to have consistent access what they do differently. You increase practice time. You increase frequency. You make everything more systematic and more deliberate in the hope that more effort will produce the state that less effort was producing before. And the more you try to solve it, the further access seems to recede. Not in a linear fashion, but with a consistency that's hard to ignore. As if the attempt to recover what was there before is creating precisely the distance you're trying to eliminate. What's happening isn't that the practices have stopped working. It's not that you've lost the skill you had developed. It's not that the process is failing or that you're sabotaging it in a way that needs to be identified and corrected. The problem is that the field has removed the support that was making access easier than it would have been without it, and it's evaluating something very specific: whether the frequency of these states is genuinely yours now, whether it has been internally consolidated enough to sustain itself without the scaffolding of external conditions that made it more accessible, or whether it still depends on those conditions to consistently appear. The difference between a frequency that is genuinely yours and one that still depends on external support is not visible while the support is present, because with support present, the two seem the same. They both produce the same states, with the same quality, with the same consistency. It is only when the support is removed that the difference appears. The genuinely internalized frequency remains. The one that still depended on context to manifest becomes more elusive. Silence in practice isn't the field telling you that you've lost what you had. It's the field showing you precisely what is completely internalized and what still needs more time and experience before it can stand on its own. And this information, however uncomfortable it may be to receive, is extremely valuable, because it accurately points out where consolidation work still needs to happen, not as criticism, as a roadmap. The second place where silence appears is in efforts that were producing visible results. And this is often where the test becomes most difficult to overcome, because it directly touches the external evidence that confirmed the process was working. The work that was clearly progressing somewhere, that was producing results you could point to and say, "Here's proof I'm on the right track," enters a period where the results stop being proportional to the effort. You put in the same energy you always have, sometimes more, and the visible progress slows down. It doesn't disappear completely in most cases, but it becomes noticeably less than it should be, given what's being invested. The doors that were opening with an ease that seemed to confirm alignment stop opening with the same ease. Where before there was a quick and positive response, now there is silence or responses that arrive slower, less enthusiastic, less charged with the confirming energy they once had. The opportunities that seemed to be organizing themselves around you with a precision that seemed more than coincidence stop materializing in the same way. Conversations that were progressing stop progressing. Connections that were forming become slower to consolidate. Progress that was visible becomes less visible. And the natural interpretation is that you're doing something wrong, that there's an angle you're missing, that if you find the right approach, the result will once again be proportional to the effort. And this interpretation produces the answer the test is evaluating whether you will give. The temptation is to work harder, to do more, to try different angles, to increase the quantity in the hope that sufficient quantity will compensate for what appears to be an inefficiency in the process, to seek the adjustment that will restore the proportionality between effort and result that was present before the silence set in. But the decrease in visible results is not inefficiency in the process. It's the field removing the confirmation that the result was offering and evaluating what remains when that confirmation is gone. It's about whether you can continue moving with the same quality of intention and presence when the result isn't confirming that the movement is correct. Whether your action comes from a place of genuine alignment with what you're doing or from a place of need for confirmation that can only be sustained when there's a result to confirm it. Because action that stems from genuine alignment has a quality that doesn't change with silence. It continues with the same presence, the same intention, the same quality of commitment, regardless of whether the result confirms it's right. It doesn't need results to know it's the right action. It knows for other reasons that are internal and don't depend on external validation to sustain itself. Action stemming from a need for confirmation changes when that confirmation is gone. It becomes anxious. It becomes urgent. It seeks the adjustment that will restore the feedback that justified its continuation. And this quality of anxiety and urgency is itself the frequency with which the field is assessing itself as not yet fully ready for the next level. The silence in the result isn't saying you're doing something wrong. It's asking if you can continue doing what you're doing when nothing is telling you it's right. And the answer you give, based on the state you maintain within that silence, is the answer that determines what the field does next. The third place where silence appears is in relationships and connections that were responding in a way that seemed unlike anything that had existed before. And this is often where the test hurts the most, because the connections that were responding in this way were frequently the ones that most confirmed that the process was real, that the frequency shift was happening, that there was something concrete and verifiable in what you were experiencing internally. Connections that had an energy of mutual recognition that was different from the connections of the old frequency. That seemed to belong to the frequency that was arriving. That confirmed, through the quality of the resonance, the ease of the encounter, the depth that came effortlessly, that you were moving in the right direction. That created a sense of belonging to something new that didn't yet have much form in other areas of life. These connections enter a period of lower intensity, not a rupture in most cases, a neutralization that is subtle but perceptible to those who were feeling the quality that existed before. The conversation, which had a quality of mutual recognition, that feeling of being seen in a way that most conversations don't achieve, becomes more commonplace. It has the quality of a good conversation, but no longer the quality of something different. The presence that nourished it becomes more neutral. The space between the two people, which previously had a specific energy, becomes simpler, more ordinary, more like any other connection. The confirmation that this relationship offered about where you were in the process, that silent validation that yes, you are becoming the version that is emerging because this person who belongs to this frequency is here with you, is gone. And with it goes one of the most powerful forms of confirmation that the process offered. And it hurts in a way that's difficult to fully articulate because it's multidimensional. It hurts like the potential loss of a connection that was valuable. It hurts like doubt about whether the resonance that existed was real or a projection. It hurts like the withdrawal of a confirmation that you didn't know how much you needed until it was gone. But the silence in these connections is not a sign that the resonance that existed was illusory. It is not a sign that the connection was false or that what you felt in it was not real. The resonance was real. The quality of the encounter was real. The mutual recognition that existed was genuine. What the field is doing is assessing whether you can maintain the quality of presence and frequency that those connections demanded and confirmed without them actively confirming that you have it. Whether the frequency that those connections were finding in you exists independently of their presence to find it. Whether what you are within those connections is what you are when you are alone with the silence, or whether it is something that emerges in response to their presence and disappears when they pause. The frequency that truly belongs to you is present even when no one is confirming it. It is present in silence just as it is present in encounters. It doesn't need a mirror to exist. It doesn't need confirmation to sustain itself. And if you need the connection to be active to access the frequency it confirmed, then that frequency is not yet completely yours. There is still an element of dependence on the external context to manifest that needs to be dissolved before it can genuinely be yours in a way that the next level recognizes as real. The silence in the connections is creating the space for you to discover if the frequency they confirmed exists within you when there is nothing confirming that it does. And the discovery you make within that silence is one of the most important that the entire process can offer. And now comes the part that is most important to understand, and also the most difficult to accept. Most people fail the silent test, not because they do something dramatically wrong, because they do something that seems completely reasonable given how they are feeling. Intensify. And intensifying the response is the one that fails the test most effectively of all. Here's why. When you intensify your response to silence, when you increase your effort, when you change your approach, when you seek external confirmation, when you look for the error that is creating the blockage, you are communicating something very specific to the field. You are communicating that the silence has affected you, that without feedback you cannot maintain the same frequency you had with feedback, that your internal stability depends on external confirmation to sustain itself. And that's exactly the information the field was looking for, not as a judgment, as an assessment of where you really are. And the information you received is that the frequency you were demonstrating when there was confirmation isn't completely genuine yet, that there's still a dependence on the external to sustain the internal that needs to be dissolved before the next level can open up stably. Because the next level, whatever it may be for you, exists at a frequency that doesn't need constant confirmation to maintain itself. It operates from an inner certainty that is independent of the feedback the external world offers. It acts, creates, moves, and exists with the same quality regardless of whether the field is responding visibly or not. And if you can't maintain that quality in silence, if the absence of feedback changes who you are and how you operate, then you still don't have the frequency that the next level requires. You still need more time in silence to develop the inner solidity that opens what is waiting to be opened. This is not punishment. It is protection. The next level does not open prematurely because if it did, without the necessary frequency being consolidated, what would arrive would not be sustainable. It would be an arrival without sufficient roots. An opening that would close because the internal conditions to maintain it would not be fully present. The silence is ensuring that when the next level opens, you have what it takes to inhabit what you will find there. And here is the central paradox of the silent test that is important to fully understand. Trying to pass the test is a way of failing it, not because effort is wrong in other contexts, but because what the test is evaluating cannot be produced by effort. It is a state, and genuine states are not performed. They are inhabited. When you realize you're being tested and start acting in a specific way to demonstrate that you have the frequency the test is evaluating, you're performing. And performance has a different quality from genuine presence that the field distinguishes with a precision you can't fake. Not because the field is hostile, but because frequency is what it is. It's not what it seems to be. It's not what you can reproduce for a limited time with conscious effort. It's your true state. What you are when you're not trying to be anything specific. What remains when the effort to maintain a certain image of yourself fades away. And the only way to genuinely have the frequency that the next level demands is to stop trying to have it and simply inhabit the silence in the way it asks to be inhabited. What silence demands is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. It asks you to continue, not with the urgency to produce results, not with the anxiety to prove that you are still in the process, not with the need for something visible to confirm that the movement you cannot see is happening, but with the quality of someone who knows they are on the right track regardless of whether the field is confirming it at the moment or not. It asks you to stop looking for the mistake, because silence is not a sign of error. It's a sign of evaluation. And looking for a mistake that doesn't exist creates anxiety, which is itself the frequency being evaluated as not yet fully ready. It asks you to resist the urge to seek external confirmation, not because confirmation is bad, but because seeking confirmation mid-test is seeking the very support the test was designed to temporarily remove. It's like asking for the instructor's hands to come back before you can demonstrate that you can swim without them. And it asks you to trust in what you've built even when you can't see that it's still standing. This is harder than it looks, because the confidence that comes easily when there's confirmation isn't the same kind of confidence the next level demands. The confidence the test is assessing is the kind that remains when there's nothing to justify it beyond what you know internally, the kind that needs no argument, the kind that doesn't depend on feedback, the kind that's present in silence with the same quality it was present in movement. And this trust cannot be created the moment you realize you need it. It's a quality that has been built up throughout the entire previous process. Every time you persevered when it was difficult. Every time you acted without a guarantee of results. Every time you chose the new frequency over the comfort of the familiar. Each of these choices built the trust that the silence is now evaluating to see if it's real. So what do you do concretely when you're in silence and feel the urge to intensify, to seek confirmation, to look for the mistake that might be creating the blockage? The first thing is to acknowledge silence for what it is before responding to it. Before intensifying, before changing the approach, before any move toward restoring the feedback that's gone, pause. And silently tell yourself this is not abandonment. This is evaluation. The field hasn't stopped seeing me. It's seeing me more attentively than before. And what it's observing is what I do when there's nothing telling me what to do. This acknowledgement doesn't eliminate the discomfort of the silence, but it fundamentally changes the relationship you have with it. And changing that relationship is what allows you to move forward without giving a disapproving response. The second thing is to maintain the quality of the action without changing the quantity. Continue doing what you were doing when things were moving, with the same intention, with the same presence, but without the urgency to produce results, without the constant monitoring of whether it's working, without the anxiety that silence means something is wrong. It is the quality of the action within the silence that is being evaluated, not the quantity. And quality that comes from an urgent need to prove you are right is not as frequent as quality that comes from genuine alignment with what you are doing. And the third thing is to use silence to deepen the relationship with your own inner certainty. The silence has temporarily removed external sources of confirmation. And this void, which seems like absence, is actually an invitation. An invitation to discover what remains when external confirmation is unavailable. To find the quality of certainty that doesn't depend on results to sustain itself. To develop a familiarity with your own frequency that is only possible when the noise of external feedback diminishes enough for you to hear it without interference. Use the silence for this, not as a waiting period while the field responds again, as a time to delve deeper into what needs to be explored so that the next level, when it opens, finds someone who genuinely has what it takes to inhabit it. You've made it this far, and the silence you were experiencing before you started watching this video probably has a different meaning now. Not because the silence has gone away, but because you know what it is, and knowing what it is completely changes what you do within it. The field hasn't stopped watching you. It's watching you more closely than before. It's evaluating, with a precision that no visible result could produce, whether the frequency you demonstrated when there was confirmation is genuinely yours. Whether the internal certainty you showed when there was feedback remains when the feedback is gone. Whether what was built throughout this entire process has sufficient roots to sustain itself without external support. And the response you give to that silence, not with words, not with intentions, but with the quality of the state you maintain within it, is the response that determines when and how the next level opens up. Not because the field is expecting you to get a specific answer right to reward you, but because the next level can only open stably when the frequency it requires is genuinely present. And the only way for that frequency to be genuinely present is through exactly what the silence is asking for: presence without confirmation, certainty without feedback, continuity without the urgency of results. Silence is the last part of the process before the opening, not the blockage. The final preparation, and you're already inside it. Leave a comment describing how silence is manifesting in your life right now. What has stopped responding? What has become harder to access? What seemed to be moving forward but has entered an unexpected pause? Because naming where you are is the first step in stopping the fight against what's trying to prepare you for what comes next. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications. Because what's being built here recognizes from within what you're experiencing instead of explaining it from the outside. And each video will arrive at the moment you need exactly what it has to say. And if you want to understand what happens when the silence ends, when the field starts responding again and the next level begins to open up, and what you need to know so you don't miss what has arrived because you weren't prepared to receive it, the next video will show you exactly that. Because crossing through silence is one thing. Inhabiting what opens up on the other side with the frequency that keeps it open is something entirely different.